ever had a situation when something happened to you or others because of a mistake you've made? Maybe you got into an accident by accident, or you didn't manage your money well and now you're in debt and your family is impacted, or you had an argument with a partner or a colleague. You handled it poorly and now the relationship is in trouble. Or being in a leadership position, you made a poor decision, a mistake that had consequences. Others were impacted, others even blamed you, and rightly so, even if hard to admit. And you can't get over it or forgive yourself, and you can't get it out of your mind. And you're frantically looking for an explanation or someone to blame because admitting your fault feels like dying. What do you do? When it comes to a situation where we mess up, the classic approach that sounds very sound and is taught to every kid is think of what happened and how you're responsible, admit where you went wrong, your part in it, apologize, and do all it takes to make amends, learn something from it, and move on. Easy peasy. That makes sense, and it seems easy, except you can't stand being guilty. It's too painful, too uncomfortable, and maybe you're even wondering why. What makes it so difficult for people to admit fault or failure? A mistake can create a stressful situation that overwhelms one's system. What does it mean? The problem seems huge while the individual feels small and helpless. This leads to overthinking, brooding, questioning yourself and others, anger, terror, anxiety. How could I? How could they? Why? Why me? Sleepless nights, blaming, rationalizing, and what in internal family systems approach is called firefighter behavior to quench the pain of the underlying guilt or shame, be it through drinking, overworking, overeating, binge watching porn, getting busy, raging, etc. Or some healthier strategies such as working out, running, meditation, going out excessively with friends to kind of divert. Bear in mind that the mistake doesn't matter so much. What matters is that for the individual, it feels overwhelming. It feels huge. That's why dismissing a child for crying over a broken toy is not a good idea. For a grown-up, that might look like no big deal, but for them, it's a big deal. According to Myers-Briggs Personality Inventory, people fall into two categories when it comes to their approach to decision-making: thinkers and feelers. There are other variables at play, but for the sake of simplicity, the behaviors described above fall respectively into these two categories. Under stress, the thinkers tend to shut out feelings, switch to overthinking, rigid, mechanistic, busy work, and for the feelers, fear and anxiety takes over, having a hard time coping, usually resorting to destructive or addictive behaviors to numb the feelings. How to effectively deal with this mix of thoughts and feelings? The first foundational block is to understand your inner world. The first thing is to understand. Understand that when you make a mistake, the way you respond to it will very much depend on your history and what your brain learned over the time about what that involves. If growing up, whenever you made a mistake, you were harshly criticized or punished, ridiculed or put down, abandoned to your own devices to figure it out, and feeling scared with no one there for you, or even you witnessed that done to someone else, your brain learned that being wrong or blamed means pain, shame, rejection, loneliness, neglect, fear, abandonment, feeling small, incapable, stupid, incompetent, worthless, and so on. This is particularly true if one grew up in a family with narcissistic dynamics, where a parent always had to be right, you were constantly blamed and criticized, rarely acknowledged, except maybe when it would make the parent look good. The underlying belief is that if you make a mistake, others will see you broken and unworthy, and that you should expect an immediate withdrawal of love and intense punishment or be dismissed altogether as a consequence. For a child, that is terrifying. The worst part is that you end up believing it about yourself too, and that somehow you deserve it. This is a painful reality to live with. So, to ban it from your consciousness, your protective system comes in. These are behavioral strategies people resort to. Some are aimed at avoiding a mistake altogether, and some are at avoiding the pain of it once it happened. In internal family systems, these are called protectors. Let's look at some of these strategies. Some people tend to justify it somehow, rationalizing or blame shifting. Always someone has done something that made them do this or that. Sounds familiar? Oh, another one might be some become hypervigilant and fearful of doing anything wrong, so they kind of go through life with an extra cautious attitude, somewhat uptight and anxious, risk averse and withdrawn. Some put on a veneer of perfectionism, superiority, or denial, rigid, often angry at anyone who falls short. Yet others resort to accommodating and people pleasing, and also sweet and apologetic to the point that when this becomes a burden for their life, and resentment takes over, usually triggering passive aggressiveness. Others will add some of the addictive behaviors already described above to distract and numb the pain. The best thing about these strategies is that they work short term, but the worst thing is that long term they are rather limiting and often destructive, causing more trouble. You know the classic one, being caught in a lie, trying to cover up another lie, will bring more shame to a system. So to soothe that, one falls back on drinking, for example, some old behavior, to take the edge off, which in turn bring more shame and conflict afterwards. So short term, it took the edge off, it worked. But long term, it created a closed loop of misery. And remember, we are built to thrive, not to be miserable. But our subconscious brains are geared towards survival. So naturally, it will pull from all our experience, all the ways in which it learned to survive at different times without much thinking. It's automatic and it's not logical. It does not stop to think what's best for you. And because most likely you learned that when you were very young, the strategies are also not very sophisticated and effective. That's why the phrase immature. And by the way, this is not to judge, but just to become aware of it. In fact, acknowledging it is a first step in helping yourself without judgment. Some of these underlying issues require deep work. There is no bypassing it if one wants true transformation and freedom from it. Meanwhile, here are 3 steps when it comes to mistakes. First, extend some grace and compassionate self-forgiveness. Now that you have this understanding, how would you treat yourself differently? Can you extend some grace and compassion to yourself as you are? Imagine if this was your child, or any child. How do you approach them? It's counterintuitive, but it actually works. In internal family systems, we talk about the good intent behind these behaviors, and showing these protector parts appreciation will often help them relax and recede, including that inner critic who thinks it's helping us be our best. Extending compassion to our feelings of shame and guilt is healing. Steve Hardison, called the ultimate coach by anyone who ever encountered him, states that the most powerful tool he acquired is compassionate self-forgiveness. Be the first to offer that to yourself. One of the rules in Jordan Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life is treat yourself as someone you're responsible to help. Treat yourself with compassion and acceptance. As you do that, you will experience an inner shift already. From there, you're in a better place to ask, how can I deal with this mistake or failure in a better way? Which leads me to the second step. Accept that mistakes are part of life. Own it. Accepting yourself when you fail helps you put things in perspective. The truth is, everyone fails and makes mistakes. Learn to think dialectically, holding two perspectives, that you will make mistakes and fail, and that you're also good and caring and able, and that a mistake does not equate your value, that your worth is inherent and you have the power to act and change things. Which leads to the third step, and that is choose to act with integrity. Do the right thing. That will minimize the unnecessary suffering and bad consequences. It will also affect your self-esteem, self-worth, and break this cycle of shame and guilt. There is so much freedom in just doing the right thing. It may seem scary, but anyone on the other side would say, I wish I knew it's not as bad as I thought. As a leader, you set an example for those who look up to you, for them to follow. To recap, admitting a mistake can be difficult because of what you learned growing up and how you were treated when at fault. Once you understand that, see if you can extend some grace and compassionate self-forgiveness and accept that everyone makes mistakes. But that doesn't change your inherent worth. And choose to act with integrity. There is so much freedom in it. Be the leader you would follow. Where do we go from here? To avoid overwhelm, it helps to break the complexity of a situation into 3 aspects involved and address each separately. The figure out group, all the thoughts around it. The feelings group, all the feelings that come up. And the actions group. Once the first 2 are addressed, you clear the way for the sound, reasonable mind to make the right decisions and take the right actions creatively and fearlessly. But this is a topic for another video. I hope you found this useful. Please share it and subscribe for more. Take care.